We await a conversation here with Ron Paul to that very question. What is not a large government or a small government, but a bought government and a government with integrity? And I think that that's the line that you were just so eloquently drawing. And clearly, we have a bought one. Time to change that. And our show starts right now. Congressman Ron Paul serves on the Financial Services Committee, where he chairs the subcommittee on domestic and monetary policy. He is also not seeking re-election in the House of Representatives to focus his ambition solely on his run for the White House as a potential Republican nominee for that candidacy. And Congressman Paul, it's a delight to have you back here. Give me any sense of why it is we're not having any conversation about canceling some of this debt, especially the debt that is being fabricated, invented, and absorbed into the Federal Reserve.
Well, that would disrupt things, and it would expose the Fed for some of the tricks that they play, so they're not interested in it. I was very pleased that I did get a fair amount of attention on the internet and people praising this idea that it was a sort of a painless way of solving the problem. But it's really only temporary, too, because you don't want to do that permanently. But if you wanted a year reprieve, and maybe the American people would get this Congress serious about straightening up their act and get together and bring this under control. But yes, I suggested that it's not a real debt. They created money out of thin air and they bought treasury bills, so the taxpayer has to continue to work hard to pay interest and pay the interest to the Federal Reserve. So if you dismiss that debt of $1.6 trillion and that payment came off, all of a sudden we'd get a reprieve. The only thing I feel like is dangerous about that is they'll take it like, oh boy, I can go back to spending again and we don't have any pressure on us to solve our problems. Yeah. But it would solve the problem of no need to close the government down, and we wouldn't have to threaten people and say, well, the Social Security checks won't be out next week and that sort of thing.
And not only that, but it also, I think, is a great way of making the point that people forget, which is that the central bank is the instrument by which we are financing our own national borrowing at the Treasury Department. In other words, we're lending ourselves our own money that we're making up on a computer.
Yeah, it's really a fraud, and it's deceiving the people. And even today, you know, before Bernanke at the Financial Services Committee, I brought up the subject again, that there's a lot of people at fault. You know, all the special interests in the military-industrial complex, the wars going on, and the members of Congress who are vying for power and buying votes. But ultimately, none of that would happen if you didn't have that Fed always there ready to buy whatever is necessary to have a fixed interest rate that they think is the best interest rates, and usually it's much lower than it should be, and therefore they allow this process to go on. And I said, and I truly believe that if you didn't have a Fed responding that way, yes, interest rates would go up and a lot of people would be worried about it, but then the whole burden would be on the Congress. The Congress would say, oh, the more we spend, the higher interest rates go up. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't have this much debt. And I think we'd all act more responsibly. So I think the Fed in many ways is a crutch, and I'd like to break that up a little bit, and that's why I suggested that we, not feel obligated to pay this debt off to the Federal Reserve.
And the other aspect of that, I suppose, is that this is a complex problem, and yes, that doing what you want to do with the Federal Reserve could be a very good way to make the point and begin the process of having to do bank restructuring. That would catalyze a long list of other things. You'd need to do a lot simultaneous to anything like that.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of other reforms that should be done, and some criticized my suggestion and said this would take some tools away from the Fed, because the Fed might want to withdraw funds from, from the banks, which I rather doubt. They're not about to do that. From Bernanke's testimony today, there's no intention anywhere soon to do that. But you could adjust that problem by just raising reserve requirements. If they want to remain in the business of manipulating, the interest rates, they still have management's tools other than owning those treasury bills and draining the banking system of dollars with them.
For years since the financial crisis, Congressman Paul, we have watched the central bank print trillions of dollars in so-called quantitative easing, QE1, QE2. They did this instead of writing down the debt at the time and restructuring the debt at the time, and instead they gave the banks and the household debt of this country to the American government, and so we find ourselves at this precipice. At the same time, there's still talk, and I want to play a soundbite of the Fed chairman, that they might want to do more money printing, QE3, even as housing, jobs, and the debt problem have not been helped by those activities. Take a listen to the Fed chairman.
The possibility remains that the recent economic weakness may prove more persistent than expected, and that deflationary risks might reemerge, implying a need for additional policy support. Prudent planning requires that we evaluate the efficacy of these and other potential alternatives for deploying additional stimulus if conditions warrant.
What is he thinking, in your view?
Well, he's just expressing what he's believed in, he's written about, and he's taught for so many years that the tool for the Fed and the responsibility of the Fed is to always print money and create credit and keep interest rates low. And he's doing exactly what he said he would do. Of course, you know, they've been doing it like you pointed out, and today I asked him about that $5 trillion that was created. It's essentially identical to the increase in the national debt during this period of time. And, you know, the position of many on his side of the argument is that we need more consumer spending. And I suggested to him, I said, yeah, but all this money didn't go to the consumers. It went to the big banks, it went to the corporations, and it went to the military-industrial complex. But if we'd have taken that $5 trillion, it comes out to about $17,000 per individual. So if they really believed in this philosophy that, oh, if the consumer would only have the money and spend it, of course, that wouldn't be good policy either. But I was trying to point out that they're not serving the interest of the average person. They're serving the interest of bailing out some friends on Wall Street by us buying up those bad assets, and the middle class and the poor really get dumped on because they're the ones who have lost their jobs.
And then the issues in Washington go beyond the out-of-control banking system and its obedience to support the incumbent structure. One other of your favorites is, and rightly so, the out-of-control nature of the TSA and Homeland Security. You and I did a half-hour podcast recently, which we just published this afternoon, and I want to play everybody an excerpt of your thoughts in that conversation, which I think you were so articulate, and allow you to elaborate as to why you think what we're seeing in the TSA is so emblematic of an out-of-control government. Take a listen to Congressman Paul.
I think we should be regulating the Federal Reserve and the bureaucrats, because we've allowed ourselves with this careless thinking to see what is happening at our airports, and symbolically it's horrible. You know, just think of this 95-year-old lady in a wheelchair and being forced to get undressed. I mean, I've been saying that if we accept that and we're not annoyed by it and we don't want to change it, I think we're in bad shape.
How does the culture of the TSA reflect the dysfunction in our government?
Well, we've been taught and conditioned to be very tolerant of it, because after 9/11, you know, people were taught to say, well, giving up our liberties are very important to be safe, which I do not believe. But we have been willing to do that. But how far can we go? And, you know, it's incremental. The other day there was an announcement that possibly Al-Qaeda might be making this plan to implant bombs under their skin within their bodies, and which means that the TSA has to be even more aggressive with what they're doing. So those problems are getting worse. But it's this, I think, conviction that freedom doesn't mean that much to people. I mean, we accept central economic planning. We accept going to war carelessly without the consent of the people and the Congress. And here we stand by and we say, oh, we have to go to an airplane. It's a little bit annoying, but let's do it. But it's getting pretty humiliating, and a lot of people are getting upset. But at my point, what I was trying to make there was, if we don't say anything, if we don't become outraged, what will they do next? And I do believe there are some who like to condition us to be humble servants, that is, do exactly as I tell us and be obedient to the state, and that's not the kind of society I want to live in.
Yeah, me neither, Congressman Paul, and I thank you for your efforts to provoke, at the very least, debate on these critical issues like monetary policy and the military. We'll talk to you sooner rather than later, I'm sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ron Paul. And I do want to direct your attention as well on the Ron Paul subject to the newly revamped DylanRatigan.com, our entire 30-minute exclusive podcast with Ron Paul on everything from the TSA to the debt ceiling to the toxic political atmosphere in Washington. We cover all the big issues in depth, and you can hear it all only and exclusively at DylanRatigan.com, or if you follow us on Twitter at DylanRatigan.